Well, hello everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Arkansas Outdoors Roundup. Today I've got two stories I want to cover for you. The first one is the new Arkansas WMA conservation license that has been recently created, or I should say enacted. July 1, I think, is when it became effective. And the second story deals with new regulations that affect the National Forest Service and how they do business. So we're going to take a look at those today. And there's a lot of interesting information. I'm going to go through what the new conservation license is, who it applies to, and why it's important. There are people out there who agree with this particular new license. And of course, as usual, there's going to be folks who disagree with its creation and why it's there and that sort of thing. So we will take a look at all of that here in just a minute. So I hope you stay with me, and I hope you find this educational and useful. Okay, so let's turn our attention here to this new WMA license, conservation license. And as the name implies, it does affect people who are in the wildlife management areas that the state of Arkansas has. So to get this license and to find out more about it, you just need to go to the Arkansas Game and Fish. You see the URL up there in the upper left-hand corner. You would go there and go down to read the 2627 hunting license guidebook. You click on that, and you will scroll down. I think it's to about page 6. At the top of page 6, it has, of course, not only this new particular license, but it has a whole bunch of other things. You see something there for bicycles, including electric bikes. They have a bunch of things that you need to be paying attention to when you are outdoors. All right. So that is where you can find a lot of information about this year's license requirements. Of course, it covers a whole host of things. You see all the hunting seasons there, and so it covers all of that. So it's kind of your one-stop shop. So let's break it down. Let's go into some particulars here. And right here, I have highlighted, as you can tell on my screen, what the new conservation license is all about. It says all persons 16 years of age or older using AGFC-owned wildlife management areas and lakes must possess an annual AGFC WMA lake conservation permit. The cost is $10.50. There are, however, a few exceptions, and let's note those. Persons with an valid Arkansas hunting or fishing license. So if you already have your 2627 fishing license, hunting license, you've already got your conservation license. So it's baked into the hunting and fishing licenses already. Other exceptions are persons traveling through a WMA on a direct route or designated through trail without engaging in any activity, or persons on a public road or navigable waterway. So let's go back to that first part there. If you are on a direct route designated through trail, without engaging in any activity. So if you're a through hiker on the OHT or the OT in Arkansas, it looks like if you're just through hiking, then you don't have much to worry about. You won't need a license to do that. And notice the little caveat there, without engaging in any activity. So if you're out there walking on the trail, but you're doing something else, if your purpose, I guess, if your intended purpose is other than through hiking the trail, if you're bird watching, if you are, I guess, even maybe doing photography, nature photography, if your purpose is other than going from point A to point B, then you will need a license. If you're just going from point A to point B on the through trail, then you don't need a license. And of course, it also says something here about being on a public road or being in a waterway, a navigable waterway. So if you're just going through these areas on a road or in a creek or stream or something, it says navigable, so it wouldn't be a creek. It would have to be something bigger than that. Have to be something that you could, I guess, get a boat up and down. And if you're just going up and down and through those areas by road or by water, then you're not going to be required to have this particular permit. Okay, the next item here is where you can get it. I just showed you the Arkansas Game and Fish website. You can go there, and if you find this page, it talks about what the conservation permit is, the information I just read to you. You can click on this particular link right here, and it will take you to the form that you fill out and you pay online, and you get your permit. It's under the category of, I guess, resources, licensing, and you see all of the information pertaining to licenses as such. Okay, let's look at the areas that this particular conservation license covers. If you are on either a WMA itself or a lake, it says lake conservation. So I guess any lake that's owned by the AG, Arkansas Game and Fish Commission. And you see the big list right here. There are some, I'm not familiar with all these places by any stretch, but there are a couple of them that I know around here. We've got the Gene Rush WMA, that's over by Richland Creek. It's on, if you're on OHT Section 8 going to Woolham, you'll go through that area, Woolham to Richland Creek. What else? Some others that I'm familiar with. We have, there was one up here. Yeah, the Frog Bayou. The Frog Bayou WMA down by Fort Smith. That's in Section 1 of the Ozark Highland Trail. So if you're just hiking that trail and you're going through the Frog Bayou area, you're going to be okay. No worries there as long as you're just hiking. Loafer's Glory WMA, I think that is also over by Richland Creek, but don't quote me on that. The McElroy, Madison County, that's over by the Kings River, over in that area. If you know where Tea Kettle Falls is, you're going to be in the McElroy, Madison County WMA. There are a few others here. You have some down in the Ouachitas. You also have, where was it? Yeah, right up here at the top. Horsehead Lake in Johnson County. I've been down there quite a few times. It's a really neat area. It's very steep and rugged, but if you're in that particular area, it says Horsehead Lake itself. The place that I'm talking about is not technically next to the lake, but it is near the lake area. So you may or may not need a conservation license. I would just go ahead and get one because you're probably going to be having to drive by this lake anyway in order to get to the areas that I'm referring to. So this might be a gray area. I don't know. I don't know how much of the Game and Fish actually manages that whole area that I'm referring to. But clearly they manage the lake area itself. So as you can see, the list is quite extensive. There you see Lake Wilhelmina. That's down in the Ouachitas there. Sugarloaf Lake. I want to say maybe that's around Greer's Ferry, but again, I'm not sure. Don't take my word for that. So it's quite an extensive list, as you can tell. A lot of areas that are covered by the Game and Fish. Okay, let's jump over to some of the comments. Like I said at the beginning, there was a lot of reaction to this new permit, and the reactions were, the reactions fall in basically three buckets. There were positive reactions. There were, of course, negative reactions. And then there's kind of this third category of, maybe you could call them political reactions, conspiracy reactions, maybe. I'm not sure, but they seem to kind of be in that domain, I guess you could say. So let's go through these here and kind of see what people's responses are. This particular individual says $10 a year to help save the natural environment from being sold off to developers because the state can no longer afford to maintain it. I'll send 20. So, his reason is that, to prevent the land from being sold off to developers. I'm not sure how likely that scenario is. I don't know if the Game and Fish would sell that off to developers. I guess it's a possibility. I'm no expert. I don't know how the Game and Fish operates when it comes to buying and selling their lands, but it might be a possibility that could happen. So that's this individual's main concern. Let's see. Other people, this guy says, I was thinking about it, and that thought crossed my mind as well. So he's not the only one who thinks that that's a possibility. This particular individual says, I do not have a problem with the fact that our state has millions of dollars. I'm sorry, I misquoted. I do have a problem with the fact that our state has millions of dollars in surplus every year, and they don't have money for conservation. He's actually asking a question there. And so it is interesting, though. The Arkansas Game and Fish, I think, gets a lot of its money from a constitutional amendment called Amendment 75. I think like 45% of the money raised from that particular tax, that particular requirement, I think it's the licensing requirement, goes to the Game and Fish. And so this individual is like, hey, I have a problem with the fact that we have millions of dollars in surplus, and here we are having to pay for conservation as well. He seems to struggle with that particular idea. Other people weighed in by saying things like, imagine looking at a bird through your binoculars and someone comes up and asks if you have a permit for that. So that's what his main, satirical point is. And then this person weighs in and says, probably next, dude, the fresh air tax. So next tax we'll have is the permit and the fresh air tax. So people are clearly piling on or suggesting here that once you have one tax in place, it can lead to a little bit of a slippery slope. They may impose this or that tax later on down the road. Okay, so that's a real fear. That's a real concern that could be a possibility. And then this person says, good, maybe they can hire people to keep the trails clean, Not that everyone seems to be littering. So more trail maintenance could go in or could be created because of this conservation permit fee. The trail systems, the OT and the OHT, you have volunteer organizations that cover those trail maintenance requirements. They do it just because they love the trail and they want to support the trail, and so they go out there and clean the trail up. So that's a huge positive. The volunteer community, the trail community, picks up a lot of that slack. Maybe this conservation fee will enhance them or enable them, I should say, to better do trail maintenance where it's needed along those trails. This individual talks about, he says, you mean people didn't need one before? I've been stopped 5 or 6 times scouting WMAs before deer and turkey season and asked if I had a permit on me. He goes on to say, I personally never looked into this because I assumed a permit was always necessary to be in a WMA. So I don't know what his particular experience has been. He says, while looking for deer and turkey, places to deer and turkey hunt, and he's been asked if he had a permit. Maybe they were asking about the permit to hunt or the permit, the permits to hunt. Maybe that's what they were asking, as opposed to just being out there on the land. So I don't know what his particular experience is, but that's what he had to say about it. Other person says, what does this mean for out-of-state people, like in Missouri? By chance, would we need a traveler or day pass, or can we get the annual pass at the same price? Good question. I don't know. I don't know if there's been any discussion about that. I'm sure there has been, but I haven't come across that. But I'm sure that they would need some sort of, maybe, I don't know if they would sell a day pass necessarily. I would imagine there's a one-size-fits-all $10.50 pass that you just buy, and it's good for the year. I bet that's going to be the only pass that they're going to offer. I don't think there are going to be any day passes. I do know that when I've gone to Missouri to go fish up there, you could get like a year license, but they did offer like a weekend license, like a 3-day fishing permit. And that's what I got, because I just don't go up there enough to fish to justify getting an annual license. Never, went up there that much. Another person says, does this mean hunters will no longer need to get a WMA on the license when renewing? If you get a hunter's license, and that should cover you. So I don't think you'll need an extra permit for hunters. But if you just have the conservation permit, you will need a hunter's license for whatever it is you're hunting as well. What is, this person says, what is considered hiking? Is it just walking on the trail, or is it defined something else, or as something else? Like I mentioned earlier, I imagine hiking, it says in the regulation, through hiking. So if you are through hiking, you're going from point A to point B, then you do not need this particular license. If you are just out walking up the trail then back, then you probably would need this license because you're on the land, and the regulation indicates a through hike. If just going out and back is not a through hike. That is an out and back hike. So I think if you're just going to jump on the trails that go through these WMAs, you're going to need to be going through the WMA, not just into it and then back out of it. So I think that's how that permit is going to be interpreted. Let's see what else we got. Here are people wondering think this could be because of the tax they got rid of a few months ago that funded the game and fish. This person says, supposedly it was partly funded by the grocery tax. I'm not sure about the tax structure in Arkansas and how the game and fish interacts, other than the Amendment 75 money from licenses going to the game and fish. Okay, let's go back and look at some other comments here. It says Kansas has been doing this for several years. So this is true. In other states, you have to have permits to hike trails and to go into other areas. So in a sense, I guess Arkansas is late to the party. We are just now starting to put in these sorts of permits and requirements that people have to pay to use the land that the Game and Fish owns. The comment here is every year, regardless of what time of the year you purchased your yearly pass, and most of the parks in Kansas don't even have water recreation usage because they don't have lakes. To go to a state park in Arkansas is free. You don't have to pay to do that. You do have to pay to camp and things like that. But you don't, there might be, in some of these areas, there might be like a day use fee. But there's not like a year-long permit that you have to buy. Let's see. This person's a little more, this is a little more skeptical here. This person says it's a ploy. They want to mine in public areas for data centers. There aren't enough people willing to pay the fee. They will say people don't want to hike or do whatever in public areas, so they are going to just give the land up for mining and data centers. Some of the grammar on these posts is kind of questionable, but the long and short of this comment is that, hey, they want to mine these areas. They want to be able to show that enough people are not using these areas because they're not buying many permits, and therefore the land would be better used for mining and or data center development. This is that kind of conspiracy bucket of comments that I was talking about. I don't know. I don't think the Arkansas Game and Fish would have that as kind of a backroom kind of discussion as far as how they manage their lands go. Could be wrong, but I just don't think it's the case. All right, a few more comments here. This person says, thank you for posting. Now I know where not to go, because I'll be damned if they'll get any of my money for wanting to enjoy the beautiful outdoors of Arkansas. So there's that negative comment that, I'm not going to pay to have to enjoy public lands. That's a common sentiment that I found out there. And this person says, this is BS. How come we didn't vote for this? I know I would never vote for this. So a lot of people see this as a tax, and it is a tax. But by the same token, there's no such thing as a free lunch. If you want these public lands to be maintained and kept healthy, you're going to have to probably have the user groups out there that use them to help fund this. All right. The state of Arkansas has funded in the past, and they're still funding it now, but maybe the upkeep is getting to a point where they need more money. So I get where he's coming from. All right, let's see. This person chimes in and says, this is just a way to try to get around the stop and ID laws. And I think maybe what she's kind of getting at here is that, we're talking about people out in WMAs, right? You're out there in the forest. And I think maybe what her point is that now, if this permit requirement is there, the forest department, the game and fish people can come and just stop you out there and ask, who you are, what you're doing there, and whether or not you have a permit. If you don't have a permit and they are suspecting you're doing something wrong, then they have now a justification for writing you a ticket, or, and I think this is the more likely point that she's getting at, or take you into custody in somewhat, and take you in and find out who you are. I have heard of situations where where ICE has gone into forested areas and just, checked people and gathered people up who were out in the forest. And this might give the ICE individuals or the state of Arkansas legal cover, saying, hey, they didn't have a permit. They were breaking the law, so we brought them in. I think that might be what she is getting at here. I don't know that, but I'm just kind of based on the sense, the feel of what she's saying here to get around the stop and ID laws. So that might be a possibility. It does make it easier for people to be detained if they don't have a permit. So something to keep in mind. Surely they're not going to ask us to pay to use something our tax dollars already paid for. Well, again, that goes back to other comments that we've just mentioned here. And this individual says, we hike and backpack a lot in these areas multiple times a year. We will be skipping these areas now. Hate to see stuff like this gain traction and get worse. More fees in more places for things taxpayers already pay for and will continue to pay for. So they're basically going to boycott going to these areas that would require such permits, because not everywhere on a trail system are you going to have a permit to do this, only in certain areas. So they're just going to find out where those areas are. I showed you the list earlier. I guess they'll skip those. So anyway, I think that's good, or these comments I've shown you give you a good idea of kind of what the reaction is. My own reaction is that it's okay to have this sort of conservation permit if it goes to actually maintaining these areas. The next thing that I want to look at here is the new regulations. I don't want to say laws, I'll say regulations that are coming into effect for the Forest Service. And it's a rule change on how National Forest Recreation is managed. So I'm just going to go through this with you, and we'll talk about kind of what this is and what I think the effects could be. On the surface, I'll just say this. On the surface, it sounds like it's kind of a good thing, but I think there are some details here that you ought to pay attention to, because it could be something that could come back and bite us being the public, in our ability to influence how the national forest is affected by its policies and regulations. Okay. The paragraph says here, new policy would give local forest managers more flexibility while reducing public review of internal guidance. So it's going to be doing two things. You're going to have a rule change that gives the forest managers more flexibility in their ability to manage the forest, but the price for that is going to be reducing public input. All right. And again, we'll talk more in a second of why that is significant. Okay, just some highlighted areas here. While it does not alter regulations governing hiking, mountain biking, camping, hunting, fishing, and other recreational activities, it could affect how quickly projects move forward and how much flexibility local forest managers have to make in making decisions. That is a good thing. You want your forest managers to be able to respond in a timely fashion. So I have no problem with that aspect of it. I think it's good to kind of let local people manage the forest in a way that promotes the interest of the forest. Now that's key. If these forest managers are feeling pressure from higher ups in the government to manage the forest in a certain way, that's a problem. You want your forest managers to have the forest that they are charged with protecting and maintaining. You want them to do what's in the best interest of the forest, not what's in the best interest of people higher up in government or people of more influence. So flexibility is good, but you got to ask yourself the question, who is this flexibility for? Who benefits? All right, it goes on to say, the proposal could have long-term implications for trail maintenance, infrastructure improvements, and public involvement. So, a shift in internal policy here. It says the Forest Manual contains the agency's official policies and mandatory direction for employees. Under the proposed rule, the manual would continue to serve as the agency's binding policy. However, the handbook would be reclassified as advisory guidance rather than mandatory. So there it is. The rule book, the manual, would continue to serve as the agency's binding policy. However, it makes it advisory rather than mandatory. In other words, you don't have to do it. All right. So these policies that are in there that the Forest Service has been charged with in the past, being mandatory things that they have to do, now become advisory, which means they don't have to do them anymore. And again, it all depends on the incentives. What incentives do these forest managers have to do the things that they are going to do? Is the incentive going to be political, or is the incentive going to be what's in the best interest of the forest that they are working with? The agency says the proposal is intended to reduce administrative burdens, encourage innovation, and improve efficiency. Again, I think we all want that, but at what price? All right, continuing on, it says here, it says the rule proposed would make several significant changes. The manual it says the Forest Service Manual would remain mandatory. The Forest Service handbooks, however, would become advisory guidance. Employees could depart from the handbook procedures without documenting extraordinary circumstances. All right, so employees could depart from the handbook procedures without documenting extraordinary circumstances. So they could do it for whatever reason they want. If they don't want to follow the handbook, they simply choose not to follow the handbook, and they don't have to document why they did it. They don't have to say, oh, there's some extraordinary reason why we did it. We're just going to do it because we feel like doing that. And again, you have to ask, why are they doing it that way? Future handbook revisions generally would not require public notice and comment. Rather than centralizing procedural decisions in Washington, D.C., the proposal would place more discretion in the hands of local forest supervisors and district rangers. So, a couple things to note here. Future handbook revisions generally would not require public notice or comment. So, whatever changes they're going to make to the, whatever revisions and changes to the handbook are not going to require public notice or comment. So they're bypassing us and anything that we might want to say about such changes. And it says here, rather than centralizing procedural decisions in D.C., the proposal would make the forest supervisors and managers, district rangers, I should say, give them more discretion. That's a good thing, but again, I think that a lot of these decisions and these forest supervisors and district rangers are going to be basically kind of told what to do. Now, why would I say that? Why am I skeptical about this rule change? Well, because if you look at what's happening in our national parks right now, you have Big Bend National Park is being bulldozed to put in the new border wall in a section that gets minuscule amounts of illegal entries at that point, but they're spending millions of dollars per day to build this wall, and at the same time they are destroying the habitat there. They are interfering with food and water sources for wildlife, as well as the migration pattern of these larger animals that move through there. So they are doing this, and they don't have to. Washington, D.C. says they do not have to do an environmental impact study. They can just do it. And that's what they're doing. So I think something like this new rule proposal that you see on the screen here, I think these changes are being advocated for, or the agency, wants these changes because of political reasons rather than what's in the best interest of the forest. In this day and age, I am very wary of the intentions of the Department of the Interior and of the Forest Service and all these other agencies that govern public lands. And I hate to be that way. I hate to be skeptical of their intentions, but I have a lot of evidence that they are doing things not because it's in the best interest of those areas. It's just because of other interests beyond political motivations. Primarily, what donors have given these legislators money to promote their campaigns and things, and of course they want something in exchange. And a lot of those donors may want to be able to mine or to use resources in these areas to pad their own profit margins. So I hate to be skeptical about the intentions of my government and about the Forest Service, but I think we have reason in this day and age to be skeptical, particularly when they don't want people to have public notice or public comments about what they're doing. That seems to me just very odd. Why shut the public out of this? Why make it more difficult for them to comment on this? Because the public gets in the way of a lot of what they want to do, right? That's clearly the reason. Why else would you want to limit their ability to comment on these changes that these Forest Service managers and rangers want to implement? Why cut the public out of the equation? I have no other reason than to think that they don't want them to interfere with the true motivations of what the higher ups in the political structure want them to do. They don't want to deal with the public. They just want to do what they want to do for political and monetary reasons. All right, let's wrap this up here. It says here the proposal could influence how recreation projects are planned and completed. Absolutely. Trail repairs following severe storms, campground improvements, bridge replacements, and other recreational infrastructure projects may be completed with fewer procedural delays. That's a good thing, right? But again, at what cost? What are we giving up to get little benefits like this? We get a few benefits, some crumbs, I guess you could say, in exchange for our public input, and not comfortable with that. It says more local decision making. Again, true, but again, you have to ask who are the higher ups that are going to affect the local decision making. It won't be completely local. They will get their walking their orders from higher ups. Okay, and the last thing here, it says perhaps the most significant change is one many recreational advocates are watching closely. Future revisions generally would no longer require public notice and comment. We talked about that. That means organizations representing hikers, mountain bikers, equestrians, hunters, anglers, and conservation groups could have fewer opportunities to provide feedback before internal guidance changes are adopted. In other words, they can adopt things pretty much on the fly when they want to without having public input. And this last sentence, I think, is key. Individual recreation projects would still be subject to existing environmental review and public involvement requirements when required by federal law. So what has happened here, like in the big beautiful bill, what one of the or several of the parts of the big beautiful bill were to get rid of a whole host of environmental rules that govern how public lands are dealt with. They got rid of those, and when they got rid of those, the other agencies like the Department of Interior and the agricultural department, they were free to kind of go do what they want to do without any regulations that they had to pay attention to anymore. And that's what it says right here. It says individual recreation projects would still be subject to environmental review and public involvement, but only when federal law required. You get rid of the federal laws that require these things, and then these environmental reviews and public involvement don't have to happen. So there it is. It sounds good on the surface. It sounds like, hey, we'll get a more responsive Forest Service and this and that. But that's what they're going to do. They want to gut the federal law so they don't have to do these things anymore. And they can kind of make like it says, make the internal changes when they want to, and they can do kind of what they choose to do. So there it is. I don't want to be too redundant on what this means, but it's something that very is important and very much needs to be kept an eye on and kind of see what happens here as we go forward. So I wanted to bring this to your attention, let you be aware of it, and put it on your radar, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. Okay, guys, that wraps up this particular episode 4, I believe, of the Arkansas Outdoors Roundup. Thanks for sticking by or sticking with me, and I'm glad you found this worthy of your time and attention. It is an important topic, and that's what I like to do on my podcast, is to bring you information that you can assess yourself. I have my feelings about it, and you have your feelings, and our feelings may or may not align. But anyway, the information, I hope to be as objective as possible and give you my take on it as well. So again, thanks for stopping by, and we'll see you next time on the Arkansas Outdoors Roundup. Take care.